Let's discuss it on Tuesday.
That's what's so...
I know, I agree.
Right, so you...
Yeah, so the nightclub, yes, it's pretty straightforward. We have a pretty clear idea of where everything's going.
So it can be done?
The main issues are just being
I think I've got the point now.
Is that inappropriate? No, it's not.
They don't hurt anyone. Oh, I see, right. Okay.
Well, no, you would have got the email.
I would.
Okay.
I think good.
Saw my email.
All right, so look, what we're going to do is we'll just start with an overarching debate. That doesn't mean that we don't have opportunities to tidy up some of the wording. I think Andrew and others have handed over some wording changes just to get things clarified and tidied up. So I would like to move the staff recommendations on page 5 of the agenda. So do I have a seconder for that, Raf? And what I'll do is I will open this up for debate, but I'm literally just going to go around the table and invite people to contribute to the debate. And I just want to start with just a brief overview. And I think the first thing that I want to say is that the fundamentals of the proposed plan that we went out to consult on haven't changed. We went out there with an objective to bring down the level of rates increase and to cap it at 5%. We went out there with a promise to put on budget the capital program that we could deliver, but also to look at other ways of delivering our capital requirements. And I think that what the amendments have done today is really capture the essence of what local government is all about, and that is democratic participation and also the provision of future-proofed infrastructure. And if there's any city in the country that knows how important it is to future-proof infrastructure, then it is Christchurch. And I made the point recently at an event that I attended, which Orion was hosting on the completion of their sort of network, which has really future-proofed the city in terms of electricity supply. And I made the point that would a private sector investor focus solely on financial return, would they have authorised the resilience measures that Orion took in the early 90s and are continuing today? And I don't think that the answer to that question would have been yes. I actually think that the public ownership question actually meant that we could forego dividends in return for resilience, and it paid off. It paid off big time, and it paid off in more ways than people realised. It paid off because it wasn't just the amount of asset that was protected, and I used the example of the small substations which cost $6 million to earthquake strengthen. $6 million. They protected up to $60 million worth of asset. But more importantly, the power wasn't off for over 3 months. And I worry about other places that haven't had that approach to future-proofing their assets and actually ensuring that the resilience is built into their networks. Same with roading, the same with other elements, that will confront other cities in the future. So I think from a lessons learned perspective, there is a lot that we have learned here in Christchurch that we're going to be able to share with the rest of the country. But in terms of this annual plan, and I'll come back to my contribution at the end, I think that what we've managed to do with these amendments is to develop an approach which picks up a lot of the features about what is important about living in Christchurch and in the Banks Peninsula, and I want to pick up on some of the recommendations that we're making here in relation to Akaroa Museum and the establishment of a working group to get things actually happening in that area. I do want to mention the Ministry of Health Council Partnership Fund, because I think it probably suffered from, not being accurately portrayed. The Christchurch Earthquake Mayoral Relief Fund was set up when people from all around the country, and actually all around the world, wanted to make contributions to Christchurch. And the Mayoral Fund was established. It was a relief fund designed to contribute to the rebuilding of the social and physical infrastructure of Christchurch following the earthquakes. For some reason that is beyond my capacity to understand, the previous council decided to put $1 million of that money into the earthquake memorial. It doesn't make sense to me. It never made sense to me. I didn't actually realise that they'd done it. And it was just a small component of a series of recommendations about the initial donations that would be made from the pool of donations. And I don't know whether it was an oversight, whether councillors hadn't really appreciated what it would mean to take $1 million of people's donations and put it into a memorial. That to me was not why people donated to Christchurch. They donated to Christchurch in order to bring about a sense of relief. It was a relief fund. And so my immediate solution, which I started work on last year, was to get the money reinstated to the fund. The difficulty is that the money was already transferred to central government for the earthquake memorial. And so by setting up this new fund, for me, it is really about taking those donations and reinstating them to the relief of Christchurch. And if there's one area, community wellbeing and resilience, that is the area where the people who donated to the fund, I can say to them, thank you. Thank you for donating money to our city. We are still a city that has needs. We are still a city that has requirements in relation to the psychosocial wellbeing. And it was the one area where the Transition Advisory Board said to central government, if you take your eye off the ball, we will not recover. We will not recover if you take the eye off the ball. This is a fantastic opportunity of a new collaborative way of working with central government around wellbeing and resilience, and I welcome it. So I would ask councillors to consider that recommendation in the light of where the true source of the funding is, not the ratepayers of Christchurch, but the people who donated so readily to our city's wellbeing in its time of need. I also want to comment just briefly on one of the items that we're requesting the Chief Executive to report on, and that is to really step up and take full advantage of the Greater Christchurch Regeneration Act 2016. That piece of legislation has been passed in order to give our city access to powers that wouldn't otherwise be available to us, to fast track changes in a way that takes the community with them. Community engagement lies at the heart of Regenerate Christchurch's mandate. So I think that this is a perfect opportunity for us to look at what needs to be done in our city, and the land on the western side of Cranford Street, excluding the stormwater basin and what's known as the Cranford Basin. I always call it the Cranford Rim because it's the bit that can be developed residentially, to take steps to seek resolution of that, to get it zoned residential. That would be a really good outcome for the city. And there is potential under that legislation to make the changes to both the regional policy statement and the district plan at the same time, and that would be a really good outcome. The second area which I'm passionate about, and I know that the submissions that came in on this were, we were, I mean, inundated is an appropriate word when we're talking about floodplain management, but we were inundated with submissions. And so the idea that the regeneration planning would be extended beyond New Brighton out to South Brighton and South Shore, where you've got the estuary side of South Shore looking for protection from the estuary, and also the other elements all the way down to the north of Bridge Street. Those elements could be dealt with, I think, in a regeneration plan. So we're asking the Chief Executive to report back on how we use the Greater Christchurch Regeneration Act in a way that gives us a sense of security as a city. Again, it's about future-proofing, and it's about ensuring that we get the best outcomes. So I'm absolutely pleased that people came forward with such strong submissions in these areas, and enable us to think of a new way to operate under a new piece of legislation, and we should grasp that opportunity and really take full advantage of it. So there are a number of issues that are included in the recommendations as tabled today. I think they do represent an incredible blend of all of the different elements that have been brought to the fore. So on that note, I might start on this side of the table and invite Andrew Turner to speak.
Great, thank you very much. And I also am pleased to welcome an annual plan that reduces the proposed rate increases and reduces the need for capital release as well. This has required financial prudence, and it will require ongoing financial discipline. I'm pleased to see a realistic view of the capital programme has resulted in a capital programme which is actually capable of being delivered, as opposed to the ambitious capital programme approved in last year's long-term plan, which required the sale of assets to fund it, and which ultimately proved to be undeliverable for reasons of capacity and due to its unprecedented size. The capital programme in this annual plan is much more realistic, and as a result, the need to release capital over the next year is much reduced. I welcome this. I remain opposed to the sale of assets and hope and expect that any further proposal for the release of capital will first of all be minimised, and will secondly not involve the sale of companies owned by the council or shares in those companies, but that will be achieved through other means. So in short, I'll continue to oppose any capital release requiring the sale of assets. In my own ward of Banks Peninsula, I'm pleased to see the fit-out of the Akaroa Museum funded. This will allow this project to be completed and for the museum in Akaroa once again to be able to resume its place at the centre of Akaroa's offering to residents and visitors. I'm pleased to see the work going ahead to look at exploring partnership in biodiversity with the possibility of a contestable fund to support biodiversity initiatives. I'm also pleased to acknowledge the Council's support for the Akaroa-Wairewa Community Board to establish a working party of key local organisations and Council staff to address concerns that came up in a number of submissions around the adequacy of refuse collection and other maintenance issues in Akaroa, and I look forward to raising this at the next community board meeting so that we can get this work underway in good time to get things tidied up ready for the next summer season. I acknowledge that funding for some projects has been pushed out, reflecting the reality that there are some capacity challenges and that some projects that we'd hoped to deliver may not be able to be delivered within the original timeframes. But I'm also pleased that we've received assurance that some projects like the head-to-head walkway, for example, if possible, will be able to have funding brought forward during the year to meet the work streams if that is able to be done, if the work on the ground is able to proceed in that way. From a social viewpoint, I'm pleased to see the Council's continued commitment to swimming pools, to libraries, to community facilities. Considering the financial pressure the city remains under, I believe that this annual plan is a pragmatic approach to delivering what has been, really some challenges, but doing that in an affordable way, prioritising appropriately, and realising that financial prudence and ongoing financial prudence will be required. So whilst I continue to have concerns about the level of future capital release and the deferral of some projects, these will be matters for the next annual plan, for the next council in fact, which will require the same level of responsibility and response that I believe we've achieved very well this year. So I'll conclude by thanking the public for their engagement with this year's annual plan through a variety of processes, and to say that I'm very pleased to be supporting this year's annual plan. Thank you.
Tim.
Thank you. I guess to keep within the 5% has been a journey, and I want to thank staff, my colleagues and the public for having an open mind and working hard to come to this, or keeping with this, within this end. Not only have we kept within the 5%, but we've also maintained the ongoing repair and replacement of our infrastructure, which is essential to our city. But also what's essential to our city is the future economic growth, and that is truly essential for new people coming in and our city to grow. And we have a couple of items there which I think are really important to mention. One is the Singularity University. I think that type of thing, keeping us in the forefront of the future of what's happening worldwide, not only for our betterment of our communities, but really our businesses, etc., which adds to our economic growth. The other one, which is a local issue, is the Cashmere Westmoreland Hoonhay intersection. With the ongoing growth that has happened in the southwest and will happen, plus the vision of the Christchurch Adventure Park and others, I think that this work in this intersection will only support this community and Christchurch as a whole. So thank you very much, as I said, to staff, my colleagues and the public. Thank you.
Phil.
So I guess an annual plan really is, there's been a huge amount of work gone into this, and I also thank staff and my colleagues. I guess today is an opportunity for us to really take stock too, not just of where we're going, but I think we've got good reason to keep in mind how in fact a lot has been achieved, but that we need to keep on, we've got so much more to do. And I think the Mayor is right. This annual plan actually is about supporting our people, the people of Christchurch. And we've moved through from a whole stage of really, I guess, certainly what we call recovery and rebuild, and now regeneration, and setting up development. Christchurch is going to be our part to do there. So I think too, though, I'm very pleased that in fact the plan allows us to keep the expected income from rates to below 5%, and also that as Andrew Turner referred to, the program is benefits by the capital program actually being able to deliver what we would expect, rather than some kind of higher ideal. We've got better cost estimates to go on, which also allow us to do that. And basically too, being able to reduce our capital release by $150 million for this annual plan certainly helps keep a far better balance. Because at the beginning of the long-term plan process, I certainly recall that we were told, or given a claim, we should sell off all of our assets. And clearly, just like Christchurch was in a very good shape before the earthquake to withstand earthquakes, we need to retain our assets to help us get through this regeneration part. So that is all part of building our resilience as a council. So I'm certainly going to strongly support the recommendations.
David.
Thank you. Like a lot of other speakers, I'm pleased to support the Mayor's recommendations, and also pleased to be part of a council that's supporting a rates rise of under 5%. Look, I applaud the realistic and fiscally prudent approach to the capital program that we are adopting now. Previous annual plans have had unrealistic capital budgets that council's been unable to deliver, and I do support this more pragmatic approach. talking of the eastern suburbs, my side of town, there has been a groundswell of discontent there for quite some time. For me, it's been quite pleasing in the long-term plan process last year and the annual plan this year that significant numbers of people in the eastern suburbs have made submissions to firstly the long-term plan, and again this year the annual plan. I know that a number of people, prominent people in our area, have expressed some dissatisfaction, but the reality is it does reflect the frustration of residents about the slow progress and the long-term apparent apathy that some people perceive about the eastern suburbs. I am encouraged when we are looking at regeneration, or the regeneration bill that's been passed through Parliament in recent months, that it does provide a mechanism to be able to address some of the problems that frustrate a lot of people, not only in my ward but across the city. So I'm very much in favour of the portion in the Mayor's recommendation where we embrace the notion of regeneration plans to address some of the issues across the city that have been particularly frustrating. My one concern is that we are going to embrace this new philosophy, but as a council we must make provision in our budgets to actually be able to enact these regeneration plans once they are finalised. The last thing we want to be doing is engaging in another round of talkfest and delays to getting these things done. So in summary, yes, I think this annual plan is very balanced, well structured, and the collegiality around the table and coming to this annual plan has been commendable, and I certainly will be supporting the recommendations going forward. Thank you.
Okay, Glenn.
Thank you. I too support the recommendations. In the wider context, 1 year on, we now have from the last plan, the establishment of DCL. We have the Greater Christchurch regeneration legislation in place. For places like New Brighton, this, in my view, serves to exist as the best chance for it. It's actually in legislation. I'm not sure how much better the locals could want than to arrest the attention of government, central and local, in such a way. The regeneration process, in my view, has to match the project. So regeneration at its heart means an entirely new thing. So if we're talking about an entirely new thing, then the kind of power dynamic has to flip over from Sarah days. It has to be one that actually takes people with it. On our plan itself, I note as part of feeding into this wider context, the comments already made over under deliverability, the fact that the rating base now is higher than expected, or rather the income from that. You'll note in page 9, reduction of 620 million in the first 3 years of the plan. It pans out to 132 over 10 years. I still have some questions in the plan. For instance, over South Shore, South New Brighton and the Estuary Edge questions. Altogether, that approximately represents a rating income to the city, if we're only talking about that in financial terms, of $1.74 million a year. What are we doing to ensure reasonable protection for the residents there? I still have questions over the proposed sale of City Care, given the net debt to revenue ratio pushing out a lot further and being lower, the under deliverability again in the capital program, and the fact that City Care provides not only a financial but a social dividend, as we saw in the Great River clean-up recently. And you'll hear my views later on the proposal to support the Ministry of Health with mental health. For me, that is fundamental to our recovery, and I will make my views known at that point. Just in conclusion, I think as councillors, it's important that we stay on our toes over not only our decision making but the delegations we've agreed on. So we still live in a city with an amplified hierarchy of needs. People still want the roads, the infrastructure fixed, and we've got to do those things. But when we go and do things like put things in rivers, which attract a lot of attention, that reminds us that we still live in this tension, which isn't always easily resolved, and that we have to stay on our toes and make good decisions, because we have people whose most fundamental needs need to be provided for, and we have others in the city who are wanting to reach for the stars, and it's not an easily resolvable tension, but actually we have to just, as leaders, just stay on our toes. In conclusion, I have an agenda and interest in ensuring greater equilibrium in the city with investment in the east as well as the west. I want to rewrite the balance there, and I would like the city to be united around the Avon or Takaro River corridor, which is arguably our greatest asset. So I'm pleased a year on that we have this legislation and this partnership, this ability to work together, but again, the process must match the projects. We have to ensure that our people are taken along on the journey.
Ellie.
Thank you. Well, I'm very supportive of the amendments as we see them today. I think when we received advice that getting road and pavement repairs completed is about capacity, is about having the resources to do the work and not about the funding, I was very supportive of a lesser release of capital. I can't question the advice of those who are far more qualified to make that call than I. However, I am supportive of the sale of non-strategic assets if required. None of us, not one of us, has ever promoted the sale of all of our assets, and for anyone to suggest that is just absolute nonsense. It appears, though, that some of my colleagues do tend to vote as a block around the table as a political group. And it's a shame when and if that is done to the detriment of the people of Christchurch. I think basing block voting on political ideology and not necessarily the actual issue by issue, is very dangerous for a city. That said, having a good balance of independent councillors and politically affiliated councillors around the table for this term has actually seen an ability to make decisions that are not necessarily the result of political block voting. And I hope for the next term that that can continue and the resulting collegiality can continue as well. The work that's gone into this annual plan by staff and our Mayor particularly is huge, as has already been acknowledged. And it's satisfying to see people at the centre of this annual plan, whether it's facilities, whether it's keeping the rates increases down as low as possible or keeping fees and charges as low as possible. It is clear that people are once again at the centre of the work that we do. Thank you.
Pauline.
Thank you. Look, I support this better and more realistic view of the capital program and our timing of delivery. I support the Ministry of Health Partnership Fund. It ties into our resilience policy work, our psychosocial health. It's the basis of strong functioning communities. Partnerships and collaboration give us better bang for buck, someone had to say it. It also applies to my support for biodiversity partnerships as well. Environment is central. Without environment, we actually have nothing. Environment comes first. We must take care of it. I support the flood plan and estuaries edge management resolution priority work. It's already in the land drainage recovery program, but submitters have once again highlighted this. We are sensitive to the difficulties and challenges and to the suffering of residents caught in these areas. I also support the Mount Pleasant Community Centre, the $400,000 for them to complete their project. This is an incredible job that they have done. It's been community-led and they've shouldered most of the finances. So let's also highlight the importance of these community facilities to our psychosocial strength in our communities. The community centres connect people and give us strength. So let's also look for opportunities elsewhere in our communities when we're building these facilities to make sure we get them right, to take opportunities to future-proof them for possible expansion. This is a good plan with rates increases well below what we have predicted last year. We hope to sit around 5% instead of possibly 2% more that we predicted last year. I'm particularly proud of our land drainage recovery program, which is really kicking away and within budget. We're moving from the investigative process through design and now into construction all over the city. It's wonderful to see. And our primary goal is to relieve flooding inside people's homes, and that is an urgent driver. Our cycleways program is also moving ahead quickly from design to construction. There's a huge amount of optimism in the city now. We had a new approach to the submissions process this year. We did have some teething problems, I think, for people not actually realising what the process was, but a lot of people gave wonderful feedback, and to have them coming in and being able to speak one-on-one with one councillor, 2, 3 councillors, staff, the chief executive, people really got a lot out of that. And I'm hoping that next year, if we do the same process, that people will realise how valuable that is and what a great opportunity it is to really speak frankly and freely. I thank everybody who came in and participated, and hope that they can actually see that we do listen, we're prepared to make changes. It gives us an opportunity to realise what they value, what they prioritise, and what they, even their ideas that they have for different ways of doing things. So thank you.
Paul.
Finish the last slide. Notes. When we were developing a long-term plan, we were faced with many uncertainties, unknowns, and had to deal with many assumptions. There were some who did not believe that we could deliver a long-term plan that would pass the audit office, but we did. We've actually built back a lot of trust with the community and the government, which enables us to concentrate on what is actually important. And here we are today with a long-term plan that's more realistic, deliverable and pragmatic. We also see that we're able to reduce the amount of capital release, but let's not forget that we currently own more assets now than we did when we first took office. We delisted our water port and bought back 100% ownership of the company to ensure we placed a Canterbury focus on its future direction. By seeing this plan, we continue to offer a hand-up approach to our community, enable them to a more ground-up approach. And that's what we do as a council, and I think that's something we need to continue on and do. We still have a long way to go to bounce back, bounce forward. And actually I look forward to being a part of that process, because we don't want to just bounce back to where we were. We need to go way past where we were and bounce forward to a place that actually makes us, Christchurch, the place where people want to come and live, work, and actually contribute to a great future for the city. Thanks so much.
Yes, Yanni.
Thank you. In regards to this plan, I think it's in some ways quite misleading to say that it's an annual plan. In fact, the changes in this plan are as significant as what was in our long-term plan in terms of the capital changes. So I think it's an incredibly important annual plan, and that it actually significantly fundamentally changes our financial strategy. And I just want to commend the work that was done around the capital review in terms of the realism rather than the huge amount of money that was being put on and carried forward. So I think this is a start of a really important process where we actually really have a good look at how we deliver and what we deliver and what the reasonable expectations are. And I think although this plan has started to address some of that, if you go through it, there's still a complete lack of synergy in some areas. For example, we've got money being spent in the Central City Accessible Transport Program where we've got monies and intersection improvements a year or two later, which is a complete duplication. Likewise with some of our master plans, we've got significant money being spent on master plan areas where we've got roading improvements scheduled several years after that as well. So there's still some work, I think, to be done to look at how we get the synergies around spending money. And I think if you look at what the priorities for our capital program are, repairing and rebuilding facilities in communities most affected by the earthquakes, reducing flooding risk, reaffirming our commitment to the eastern suburbs so that outcomes and levels of service are even across the whole city, ensuring that there's good social infrastructure so people feel safe and involved, and there's key facilities, libraries, rec centres and pools, prioritising the repair of our streets, pavements and curbing across suburban areas, particularly the worst affected communities and areas, prioritising spending on water quality, including protecting our groundwater and raising the quality of our urban rivers, and prioritising suburban regeneration while balancing suburban central city projects. I still think we still have a way to go in terms of that continuum. And if you look at just the small amount of money being spent on road renewals, for example, that are in some of the more historic areas of the city that have older types of curb and channel, and those communities are still getting 4 different types with the skirt repairs. So we need to, I think, continue to be really strategic around how we're investing our money, making sure that when we do the repairs, we actually take a best for the city approach, not a best for government approach, because the best of government approach to date has shown that we've got lowered standards, we don't have modern environmentally friendly designs that cater for communities. We have designs that actually in the long run will cost us a lot more because we'll have to come back and fix them later. So there's a number of things in the plan that I agree with and likewise disagree with, and I guess that we'll get a chance to have a debate around or put some of those amendments shortly. But fundamentally, I think those priorities for me are what's really important, and there will be changes that we do as we go through the process to make sure that those priorities are really at the top of our mind. The other point I want to make is that I am concerned about the match funding going into the government. I actually question why it should be coming out of that budget when this council currently spends quite a significant amount of money towards health and mental health through our grants, our community grants process. So I have no problem with us spending the money that we're already spending on it, but I do worry about the precedent that this sets with government, that to get government to fund the core things that government should be funding, we have to stump up as a council. And I think of the housing issues that we're facing, where we actually have been excluded by central government from being involved in social housing, which seems extraordinary. So I think we need to be mindful of the concerns. I do take on board the Mayor's point, and I actually voted against the money from the council going from the Mayor's Welfare Fund into the Earthquake Memorial because I didn't believe it was a right fit. So I think it is better use of the money going into this. But I do think we should think about the existing budgets that we have rather than additional money coming from other budgets in that regard. So I think just finally the point was made that we should always do what's good for the city, and I think what's good for the city is retaining our assets, retaining our strategic assets. One of my top Instagram posts was the photo of the parking being charged $5 for the first hour in the central city from a private provider. So actually owning public car parking buildings has a huge impact on people. I note just recently in Auckland, people were fined by Wilson's $65 for parking over 15 minutes late in their private car parking building. So, you know, things like public ownership of our assets, I think are incredibly important for the well-being of the city, and this budget shows and that actually there is no need to sell off our assets. There's no reason, in my view, to do so. In fact, I can't see what's good for the city in the long run. Maybe there's a short-term gain, but in the long run, I think it will put us at a huge deficit, and it's something that we should avoid. Selling off things that bring in income to spend on things that lose money and require ongoing operational costs of a significant investment, I think is actually not good for the city long term, regardless of which political party I choose to belong to. It's my view, even from a financial sense, there is no case that selling off things that raise revenue and raise money and have a much more wider strategic advantage to a city through social, environmental and cultural well-being as well as economic well-being is the right thing to do. So yeah, thank you.
Good. Brad.
Thank you. Most of the big issues have been canvassed, but one thing I would say is that I think the process around this annual plan was very good in that councillors set the strategic direction from the beginning to the organisation, and the organisation followed it very well, and I think that's something that I think we can get better at. It's a lot easier for the organisation to develop strategies and policies when they know what the big picture is, rather than councillors making random decisions and random requests throughout the year. So that's good, and I hope that will continue. Clearly the rates have come in just below 5%, which is very encouraging, and I think council could look at actually making that a permanent cap. I think that would send a good message around financial discipline. And the capital programme, I think, is actually the big piece of work in this. You know, we're going to spend $4 to $4.5 billion over the next 10 years, and how we do that is very important, and there has to be room for some savings in that big number. So I think that is a piece of work that will be ongoing. Started last year. We recognised in the long-term plan that that work needed to be done, and we signalled it clearly back then. The external advisory group were very helpful in that process, and I think now we really need to look at how we can deliver that programme in the most efficient way possible. So that's it. I think it's a good annual plan, and I think, you know, we've still got a lot of work to do, but I think we're setting the right course and right direction.
Jamie.
Thanks. Obviously, 5 years on,